nobody else. I'm 29. I live in Salzburg. I'm really passionate about nonviolence activism. I love cycling, bread baking. In EYP, I've been active roughly around 2011 and 2019. I started mostly with organizing sessions. I've had organized a national session in Austria. I've been then really into editing. I've been editing an international session in Izmir. And then like my EYP journey ended really on the training spectrum. I've been also with Valerie here at the training for EYP trainers. And I led one 2019, which was my last event here. So it fills my heart to be here with you today. It brings up lots of like lovely memories for me. Yeah. My work side, which is I guess the reason why I was asked to speak with you here. I've been working in the digital realm as a software developer first, and then as an organizational consultant. So I've seen a fair amount of organizations from the inside. I've worked for some or in some social impact programs myself, done a project in South Africa, for instance, and some projects in Finland at Futurist, at the company that I've worked with. And where first I was really focusing on the digital aspect, on agile methods, and then more and more it was about how do organizations structure themselves, how do people collaborate, more into coaching. And in fact, I do a training for psychotherapy at the moment. So it's quite a transition that I'm in as well. The main message that I want to leave you with today is that organizations are incredibly diverse, and the sustainability programs that they have are incredibly diverse, and the people that are behind them and their motivation to do them are different for every organization. And what do I mean by that is I was thinking about what was the reason that Futurist, the organization that I've worked for, why did we have a social impact program? And I think the answer might be very, very different to Coca-Cola or Red Bull here in Salzburg. And that's fair, but that's really important for you to know when you're working with organizations such as that. I want to give an example, and let me see whether my screen share is going to work here. Can you give me feedback whether you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Hey, awesome. So this is the social impact program for Futurists who I've worked with it's called the SPICE program, and like it's a digital company, Futurists. We create digital products and organizations. So their social impact program was really focused on first building a better world. So it was a bit about social impact, but then a lot about we make our people happy. It was about employee engagement, and we benefit our company. So they call it skill building and engaging our employees. So the main reason why they've invested quite a lot of money in it is to make their employees more happy, that their work is more rewarding, that they can improve their skills, like people like me who can then do projects that I wouldn't do otherwise. That is very different for other organizations. So there might be a more like a PR focus in there for local organizations. There might be even a legal responsibility for companies to do a certain amount of or types of projects. So that's very different. And here I would just have a question for you. Like, I'm assuming that maybe you've been thinking a little bit about it. Maybe some of you have been in touch with companies. What is your experience with, what is the background behind their motivation of organizations, why they do social impact programs? And I'd invite you to contribute just either by typing some motivation in the chat or by just unmuting and voicing some experience that you had.
I think in my experience, it's partially just because they have to, because they need to have, at least in Netherlands, they need to have like, I think, corporate social responsibility. So it really depended on the company I asked. Larger companies usually would be like, yes, we sponsor only children becoming more active with team sports in these regions. They just picked a niche and went for it. And then smaller companies I found were often a lot more personally involved as well, and a lot more vague in what exactly they, like how they filled in that corporate social responsibility.
So you mean like the contrast between the organizations that want to do the checklist and then the organizations that really want to be involved and co-create with you? Yeah, hey, awesome. Yeah. And then I'm assuming that in the Netherlands, it's a question of the size of the organization, whether they need to have a program, right?
I'm not entirely sure, but I know the bigger ones it needs, yeah, I know at least for the bigger ones that they need to have it. From smaller ones, I assume they don't need it in the same way, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, cool. Hey, thanks for sharing, Saskia.
I would add something on that, on the social responsibility stuff is a little bit different, for instance, from Georgian example, because social responsibility is something that nearly all the organizations have, and they have written that, oh, they have the social responsibility, and well, we do approach nearly all the companies for the fundraising to try something and stuff. But in the most cases, they have written, but they don't really put much emphasis on that, and they don't really think to make a strategy in it in the field or something like that. So they just have it, and unfortunately not much emphasis on it, and which is technically sad. But yeah, that's background in Georgia.
That's the experience I had also within the organization, that is really, really difficult to make long-term plans for a social impact program, because like business reality is just that there are like these like really urgent things, and then there's money low, and then there's market pressure, and then the social impact program is the first thing that doesn't get the attention that it needs, because it doesn't have this urgent factor, but it's rather this long-term strategy. So yeah, I can totally feel you, even though I think from the outside it feels like our organizations had like a really, really good strategy. Even from the inside, it looked incredibly messy and not at all like we had a long-term strategy.
From my work experience, I've been working in a very small company based in Munich, and what was super important for us was to support local suppliers and to only rely on like local suppliers who boost kind of the local ecosystem instead of like sourcing it out to global operations. And I think it's much easier if you're starting at the very like an early stage supporting these projects, as it is easier to build up that kind of social impact if you're still small, and then you can also kind of grow with it when it grows bigger. Yeah.
I think this is especially true for the organizations like Saskia said that want to be involved, like you said, that they want to be in there early possibly. And then I think that for some organizations that might even be off-putting. So it's exciting to hear from you that the organization that you work for, that you wanted to be in there early, and regional also, which is, I guess, for EYP events also interesting. What is the angle, and where do the people, are they willing to contribute? Any other experience, maybe some contrasting experience from what we've heard so far? Cool, not for now. In that case, there's like something that helps me there is just always to look at the websites and the reports that the organizations put out. I think like at least they have a website, or at least they have a report every year that they're serious about, where you can basically find really their motivation, especially if you're reading in between the lines and beyond we want to do good in the world, you'll notice what projects they really like to support. The second thing that I wanted to talk about today is the people behind the sustainability programs. And that is an experience that I've had for sales or for sustainability programs, that you're always talking to individuals and people. And in the end, there's going to be a person who's making the decision whether EYP is or your EYP event or the organization is something that they want to collaborate with. It's rarely ever an anonymous panel that isn't emotionally invested in it. And so for me, that I noticed that some of those people have their career is dependent on them. So they are going to be measured from their superior or from their organization of what are the kind of projects that they support. But then in other scenarios, they might be really intrinsically motivated, or they might really want to be emotionally invested in a project. And that is, again, very, very different. I think for us, for instance, we're a company of 500, 600, and there were 2 full-time employees who basically really invested their professional life into building this program. And they handpicked the projects that we were supporting. So you really needed to have a good contact with those 2 people to have a chance of getting of collaborating with the program. I'd be curious from your side, what was your impression of the people that you were in contact with, or the people that maybe you were profiling? What were their motivation of running the sustainability program?
I'll go first, and then others also have some time to think. From, again, my fundraising experience for the sessions, again, in Georgia, it is a bit hard to find sponsors for the different events. And also when you approach them in the, if it is like more large scale, that's better. And when it comes to the sustainability and when you approach them, there is usually from our side 2 main opinions from the other side. So either they do not really, or they are not really interested in any of the sustainability or any of the really important topics, because they simply want to work by themselves and are not interested in really contributing in the youth society or something like that. Or there is the other side who are actually working in the field and who are really, really glad to help you out. And actually maybe like these kind of companies or foundations are just 1 or 2, but good thing is that when you contact with them, they're really hyped and really motivated to helping you. They might also give you some like really useful contacts for you to afterwards get some other partnership, or they know somebody who might help you. And even though there are many companies who doesn't really care, I would say even the ones who kind of are interested has still really good contribution. So yeah, that's from my experience. And yeah, if anyone also has any follow-up or share their experience, please feel free to or raise hand or just unmute yourself.
Thanks, Becca. Something I think that I'm glad that you're highlighting it again is that it's incredibly diverse of the background of the people making the decision also. Like some of them are going to have a social background, maybe even specialized in sustainability programs, whereas the majority of people that I've worked with are people who have a background in the field who just stumbled to be responsible for programs like that. Or so that also makes for me a difference of what is the language that I'm using, or what is the easiest way to find a connection with that person.
Yeah, I think I often found the same, that when it was like a slightly larger company and I would go on their website and see all their goals and it would align and that would be nice. And then I would actually come by or call like my local facility of that company, usually those people would be a lot less, not necessarily involved, like they would be very nice kind of people, but they would be kind of less informed about the goals that their company has, just because it's like not really what they're doing in their day-to-day life. So usually I found that then you have to give a lot more explanation on how those are connected, and like they either, I feel like they are a bit more like they are willing to listen, definitely, because they, especially if you come by, because they see a human person, so that's always nice. But I think they also do have like less vested interest in their company's PR and that kind of stuff. So you kind of have to take a different angle and not be like, oh, we will give you this much promo, but more like, we are just doing a very nice thing in this region. And yeah, in that way, I think it's good to, like, what in fundraising always, like, know your audience, know who you're talking to. But I think that really differs also from company to company, as Sebastian already mentioned.
And even there within the organization, I love what you're saying there, that like the regional office probably doesn't know about the global strategy, or there's a likelihood, you know, if Christopher said, I think he's from Munich, if you would have asked our Munich office for support or in a project, I don't think they would have even answered your mail. Whereas if you would have messaged certain people, I guess in Helsinki, you would have gotten really enthusiastic responses, no matter whether there would be support or not. So there, I mean, there's a lot of like organizational complexity there, and the motivation behind supporting projects on a local level might be very different for on a global level. Any other experiences with people in the organizations that you've worked with?
So I've experienced a nice cooperation within the UAP background with a company where we collaborated on offsetting kind of CO2 for the transport, trying to figure out how we could offset some kind of our emissions, which are for UAP sessions mostly related to transport, when a lot of people travel to the session. And this has been super cool and also super fun for the organizing team, as the person we've been working with there was very keen on helping us and explaining it to us. And was not like really fundraising based, but more like a knowledge exchange. And that person was actually, she was working in that field like professionally, and she was super interested in just helping us also make a difference within our kind of small project. Yeah.
I mean, this is the dream scenario that you're explaining, that there is a flow that goes in both directions, where it can be an exchange of knowledge, maybe money, time, and just a shared passion of a project. And I don't want to paint it too like fairy tale picture, because I've done fundraising in EYB, and there were days where I hated it and where I struggled a lot, and it can be a frustrating job, or at least it was for me. But then when it comes to a moment like you've explained now, that's awesome if there is like a collaboration on that level.
I mean, for sure, in the end, you always just mostly focus on like the targets that you got and the corporations that you achieve, but there are like a lot of rejections. But I mean, that's part of the fundraising process.
Maybe what I would like to add is also that when you do get people who maybe are like more personally involved, it can be so motivating, like kind of going off Christoph's example here as well. I did also have an experience where I had to find a venue last minute, so it was more like in-kind fundraising, and like literally like 5 days before the session, and I needed a venue. And then I was just calling, you know, as you do, and then this one lady was like, oh, like she did not end up giving the venue, but she gave me like a contact list, and she was like, yeah, you know, I will give you like this number. It's like a niece, it's like a far niece, because I'm afraid like our location is not available, but like I'm sure she can fix something up for you. I'll text her, I'll send you like, if you can't figure it out, then let me know, then I'll try to find some more contacts and I'll ask around. And that kind of motivational support, even when you don't get actually anything from it. I think that's also super valuable and a great asset of like these people that are very involved and have like that social background. Sorry, just a little.
No, I love it. I mean, when there are moments where your face sparks like this, that's where fundraising works well. I mean, that's a relationship there. And I think it brings me to another thing that I want to highlight that both of you, Christopher and Saskia, you've mentioned, is that there are very different kinds of things that sustainability programs can offer. For us as the futurists, it wasn't, I've not heard of a single project that we've supported with direct financial support, for instance. My work time for a certain project was supported, but that was like a minor amount of a maximum, I think, €1,000. But then we've been investing a lot of time of people in the organization, or maybe some investment to NGOs that, like for instance, we've been building the arms report in Finland, where we've been doing a big visualization with an organization together. So there are different things that they can offer, and sometimes it's the network, like you said, Saskia, that they can help you access contacts that you wouldn't have maybe reached otherwise. Generally, and that comes a little bit to the point before, what the person is after for me is, I won't know if I don't do my research. And you said know your audience, and I always stalk my people on LinkedIn or maybe Facebook, or depending where they are, whatever their professional network is. And so not just the organizational one, but also especially their private one of the contact person, so that I know what they're after. In terms of what the programs can offer to you, what is your experience there? Like, of course, we've been talking about in-kind, and we've been talking about network, even CO2 offsetting. That's a cool example. What are some other examples where you felt like there was a good collaboration between an organization and a sustainability program? What did they offer each other?
I had once this experience with a company, and they were very willing to help, but more as in like, yes, giving trainings, but also just giving talks and participating, because they like the head of the company, like it's a woman, and like all of this, you know, very inspiring people. So they were really saying that for them it's also good to show that people who lead their company are like inspiring for young people and all of this. So like they offer it to us without us really asking, because we were not even like, we didn't know that was something. And I think that was something super nice. And yeah, it was definitely like super interesting. And they were just very willing to help overall in a more, yeah, like how to bring impact to the event. So that was really nice.
Okay, thanks. Is it Anok? How do I pronounce it?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Kind of, yeah. I think something what I love what you're highlighting there is that very often you don't know how you can collaborate, and then what they're offering or what you're offering is like something that emerges. And so very often, and I've been very often been falling into this rhythm of, okay, I need something from you, and I'm asking for something, and I'm begging for something, and then there is a need on the other side, and there is some real willingness on the other side. Maybe there's an imbalance, that there's more organizations asking than there's organizations offering, but the ones that are offering, they're really looking for something. And maybe it is for contribution and exposure. Maybe it's they have a female CEO that is really passionate about the exposure there. And they can contribute with talks or trainings, or yeah. Any other experiences on that field?
I wanted to share a reflection that I think is funny. in my experience, when you have meetings that are not with foundations or institutions that really specialize in giving out grants, the meetings that are successful are the ones where we spend more time talking about our values and sort of general, direction and aligning there than talking about the project. So if in the meeting I spent more than half of the time trying to explain the project, I already know that it's not going to be a yes. And usually somehow, right, even though it's still finances in most cases, it really is always an emotional decision. So your woo factor and ability to connect on the level of values and things you find important, I think are really sort of make it or break it. And of course, maybe, it's not going to be just one meeting that will take you to, I don't know, 5,000 euros a year kind of ongoing partnership. But it's a relationship that you start to build, and it really starts with this: are we speaking the same language? Do we see the same things that are important or not?
What's the kind of program that you were talking about now? Like which size you said?
This is my general experience from the past many years, so it's not referring to anything specific. But it's like this with, for example, the partners that we have from the UN organizations, that it's always, more important for us to talk about the issues that we see and sort of how are we going around to solve them, and then think about, all right, how can we collaborate to help fight those issues together.
I think there's like what I'm hearing there from you, Val, is also about, yes, it's cool to enable an event with 500 youngsters or 100 youngsters, and they can come from Europe, and it's like an awesome project. But this idea that EYP has of peace, about education, about enabling young people on a cross-border perspective, I think that is something that resonates for me so deeply, and I really believe it resonates for other people as well. And if we can sell them the vision that we have with EYP beyond an event, then I think it's easier for them also to be on board with that. And maybe there's also more overlap between their initiatives and projects.
And also to add, I think there is also so much with the program that we have, there is so much of richness in it, of different values that it tackles. And there's definitely the peace building aspect and the exchange aspect, and sort of let's not have war ever again aspect. But there's also investment in future, investment in young people, skill development, political education. I think really you can, figure out maybe what speaks most to you, and then figure out what would potentially speaks the most to the partner. And advertisement time, our new strategy is a great place to start. It really spells out all of those, all of our values and specific action points that you can really look at and turn it into a nice discussion starter.
Yeah, there two things that come to my mind there is that this again is very different, whether there is a pragmatic, maybe on a smaller level of organizations, and then like really like large programs that are really like invested in this systemic change. So there might also be a different kind of language, and how much you're focusing on the values and how much you're focusing on the very practical things. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your experience there, Valerie.
I can go with one experience, which was one collaboration which we have had with one of the organization's branches in Georgia. It was really successful for the NC, and also it was really, well, we have never done that kind of thing before. It was, we first place approached the representatives or field representatives of the organization in Georgia. We introduced the idea of the project, also the values and stuff, and they become really interested in it. And we also caught their interest that they really wanted to contribute. They were like, this was really new partnership. We have never get in touch with them before, and they were like they would helping us, but also looking at us, what we're still doing. So like just double checking how we were working. And then they offered, so we have this exchange. What we did basically was we had a speaker from their side on the opening ceremony, on the closing, no, on the closing ceremony, no, on the opening ceremony, I was right, yeah, on the opening ceremony. But also what we did was before the event, our national solution conference, for instance, the organization was hosting another event, which was gathering some people from the country about some specific, like it was sustainability of budgets in the organizations or in the government side. And what they asked was our help in the organizational aspect of their event. So a couple of organizers from the organizing team went to this very event to help them organizing this like kind of registration desk, help them out in just like on the organizational matter what that come up during the event. And that was really useful and really good bond that we made with them. And on top of that, they really liked what we have done and how much we have done. And then we've asked something else to them. So like, can you also maybe cover this expenses of ours? And then they added more money, and then we got more money and better this collaboration. So yeah, that was a really good example of like our collaboration, I would say. Looking forward for more of those.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. I want to like highlight one structural complexity that we have in EYP here is that our projects are rather short-lived, and the involvement in fundraising, at least in my experience when I was involved, is rather short. So it's very difficult to build long-term relationships. And for us, from an organization, from Futurist, the real cool projects developed over a time. It never developed by someone contacting, hey, do you want to support exactly this project? But it started with a meeting, a dinner maybe, and then went on with people staying in contact, and then opportunities emerging. And then the scope, as you said, Becca, first it's a few organizers that go there, and then maybe it's covering of expenses, but it increases. And also that for some organizations, there is certain budget available at a certain time. And if at that certain time, you're a contact of them, then bingo, that's where you want to be.
If I could add to this, I think then ideally there should be some sort of strategy, and I think maybe it's a very tailored approach, but to how to stay in contact and sort of remind of your existence. Because of course, if you have a meeting and then half a year after a budget comes, it's not granted that that person who's responsible for the budget will remember about the meeting that you had half a year ago. So I think there are some approaches with doing newsletters, there are some just maybe doing it more personalized way, or maybe, stacking people on LinkedIn and somehow engaging with them. But I think unless there is some point of contact where from time to time you check in on each other, it might just slip.
And it's always helpful to know who was in contact with before and who had that relationship maybe before, even if those are alumni or not active EYPers. I'm sure that a lot of alumni would vouch for the organization even more afterwards than when they were active in EYP. So I think that can be also a leverage. Specifically now about what kind of support the programs give, this is something that the reports of any sustainability program will tell you exactly. They will mention for each project usually how they support it, or at least give you a hint there. So that gives you an idea also about what is the program can offer, at least on a normal collaboration level. Yeah, I'm thinking about closing it a little bit, and then maybe we can have some last questions. I think what I really want to pass on to you today is that the programs are driven by people in the organization. So there's always a person behind there that is wanting to have an impact. I mean, there's also a reason why they're working at a sustainability program or social impact program and not at their core business, for instance. And if you can find that person, find them, understand what drives them, what are their success metrics, how can you as an EYPer help them succeed in their job? What is their supervisor going to ask them on his performance review or in his feedback talk? So the more you know there, and the more you can understand the situation that they are in, the easier it will be to build that relationship. And are there any remarks, comments, or questions now at the end of this from your side?
You can ask them in the chat or raise hand or just mute once again to remind you.
In that case, I just want to add like one message to you. I think that I cannot comprehend how much has been enabled for me personally by people like you doing fundraising. I cannot begin to describe to you how different my life would have been without EYP. And I haven't even fundraised a small fraction of the amount that I've spent within that period. And I know that can be frustrating, and it's not always easy maybe to bridge that gap, but I just want to express my full gratitude to you enabling this to others now. And a big thanks for joining in today.
Yes. If you still have any questions, please do ask. If not, then Sebastian, also thank you very, very much for joining us today. It was really, really interesting to have this talk. And yes, thank for the participants also for joining and staying with us. Yes, if there is not any other question, then I can say that we're done with today's morning activity. For the trainees who are joined today here, we're starting in 15 minutes with IO Talks with Anya, the Executive Director of EYP. And yes, see you there then. Bye, everyone.